सत श्री अकाल एंड वेलकम टू सीजे सिद्धू शो। जिस तरह तुहानूं पता ही है कि एवरी थर्सडे असी थोड़े रूबरू होईदा, थोड़ी गलबात कराई दी है, मोस्टली पॉलिटिशियंस, ताकि तुहानूं वध तो वध इन्फॉर्मेशन दी जा सके कि अपनी कम्यूनिटी की चल रहा है, अपने आले दुआले की चल रहा है, फैडरली की चल रहा है, प्रोविंशली और सिटी हॉल दे विच। सो पॉलिटिशियन जदों आउंदे आ वो फर्स्ट हैंड तुहानूं इन्फॉर्मेशन दिंदे आ ते उन्हां ते एक तरह का बाइंडिंग भी हुंदी है कि गलत इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं वो दे सकते। सो जे उन्होंने नहीं पता हुंदा वो कह देंगे वो विल फाइंड आउट एंड गेट बैक टू यू। और सो इस करके जी इन्फॉर्मेशन मेरे प्रोग्राम के थ्रू आती है, मोस्टली ऑथेंटिक हुंदी है खबर न्यूज़ या इन्फॉर्मेशन जी पॉलिटिशियन दिंदे है ते उन्होंने जिहड़े करंट मुद्दे चल रहे हैं उन्होंने बारे गलबात करी दी है। अज वैसे जी ब्रेकिंग न्यूज़ तुहानूं पता ही है, यैसटरडे हैपन हुई सी, जगमीत सिंह फैडरल लीडर ऑफ NDP pulled up the plug on supporting federal liberals. So ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਪਲਾਈ ਐਂਡ ਕੌਨਫੀਡੈਂਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਗਰੀਮੈਂਟ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਕਰਤਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਕੌਨਫੀਡੈਂਸ ਵੋਟ ਦਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਆਇਆ ਐਂਡ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਡਿੱਗ ਵੀ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਆ ਸਕਦਾ। ਉਹ ਕਦੋਂ ਆਉਣਾ ਆ, ਕਿਵੇਂ ਆਉਣਾ ਆ, ਉਹਦੀ ਹਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਕੋਈ ਹਲੇ ਉਮੀਦ ਨਹੀਂ। But you never know in politics. Politics never a dull moment in politics, right? And as you know, in my last show, I told you Kevin Falcon stepped down, and not only stepped down, but he canceled all his campaign and pretty much decimated the BC United and used to be BC Liberal Party. So that was a pretty courageous kind of move on his part. What going on behind the scene, and we still figuring out, try to find out what transpired. But ये सारियां गल्लां बातां करन लई मेरे कोले अज जिहड़े शामिल है वो काफ़ी knowledgeable है। हालांकि she don't need much introduction. She's all over the TV programs. You see Global or CTV or all the current issues. I'm talking about Elenore Sturko is a Canadian politician, as you know. And she was elected MLA from Surrey South in by-election in 2022 with BC United. And she served at that time as a shadow minister for mental health, addiction, recovery and education. क्योंकि ये मुद्दा बहुत बढ़िया है, ये बारे गलबात होनी है। And on June 3rd, 2024, she crossed the floor from BC United and sat as a conservative party, becoming the party's 4th MLA at that time. I will find out if anybody else, crossed the floor. And as you know, Sturko formerly was a spokesperson for Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I think as a sergeant. Welcome to CJ Sidhu Show.
Thank you for having me on again.
So let's start with what happened in BC politics, because you're MLA and now you're with BC Conservative, and you were one of the early ones who crossed the floor. Tell my viewers a little bit about what transpired you to cross the floor. We will start with that.
It really came down to the things I've been hearing in the community. People were very concerned about the vote splitting, CJ, and until really recently, that was something that has been a major concern coming up to this election. People asking me, Elenore, what can you do to try to stop the votes from splitting? I tried to encourage, from within the party to have something to be worked out so that we would be able to come together. That didn't happen at that time. And so, at the end of the day, each of us is a leader in our own community. And so I can't make someone else make a decision they don't want to make, but I can choose for myself. And so I ultimately decided that I wanted to cross over to the Conservatives at that time. And I still believe it's the best chance to defeat the NDP, which is a priority for me, seeing, just crisis after crisis, in BC right now. Whether it's healthcare, education, housing, affordability, 6 people a day dying of overdoses. We saw a random stranger attack, horrific, yesterday in Vancouver. So many crises. We need a change in government. And so for myself, I decided, I'm going to make the decision, and it was not easy, to leave my colleagues from BC United. I was invited by the Conservatives to join, and I did that. And it was really difficult. But you know what? I'm very happy I did. I hear all the time feedback from the community about, people are very happy that I had made that choice. And, I've got my sights set on winning my seat in Surrey Cloverdale this time. And I'm really excited for the future. And I hope that we make it across the finish line as a government so that we can get this province back on track.
ਸੋ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਛੱਡ ਗਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਕੈਵਨ ਦੇ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ, ਇਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਕਾਰਨ ਸੀ? ਸੋ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਕ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੀ ਸੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਬਈ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੋਟ ਸਪਲਿਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ NDP ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਜਿੱਤ ਜਾਣਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ NDP ਦਾ ਮਿਸਮੈਨੇਜਡ ਆ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੋਵੇ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਐਡਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੋਵੇ, 6 people dying every day in British Columbia, that's a huge number। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਫੈਕਟਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕੀਤੇ ਬਿਹਾਈਂਡ ਦਾ ਸੀਨਸ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣੀ, ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਹਰ ਕੋਈ MLA ਆਪਦੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੀਡਰ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਲੀਡਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਡਿਸੀਜ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਬਈ ਇਟ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਦ ਬੈਸਟ ਫੋਰ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਐਂਡ ਫੋਰ ਦੇਅਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਬਈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਫਲੋਰ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਓਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ। ਐਂਡ ਮਾਈ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਲੀਡਿੰਗ ਟੂ ਦੈਟ, what transpired all of a sudden when Kevin, in a very short period, had a meeting with John Rustad and with their team, board members, and they both came out. I seen the press conference, and he totally canceled the campaign, and he even decided not to run for MLA. And do you have any idea what went behind the scenes?
Well, I don't have many details that I can share. I wasn't part of the team that was doing any of the negotiations. That's not really my wheelhouse. I'm still an MLA. My job is really to still continue to look after the community until the writ drops. But what I can tell you is, I think that at the end of the day, there was a willingness to try to do the right thing for BC. And CJ, the thing is that I know that there was some hard feelings, even the day of BC United.
It was a big disruption, if you think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people are sitting MLAs, and they long time serving MLAs. Yeah. And politically, when you are a political arena, all of a sudden when they pull the plug.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing, when I had lots of media requests as soon as it happened, but I didn't do any interviews actually, except for I talked to the Cloverdale reporter just briefly. And part of it was, I just wanted to let things go between Kevin and John, as it should, and between those executives at both parties that were trying to work things out. But people would often ask me, oh, you must be so pumped, you must feel so great. And to be honest, it was more of a feeling in some ways of relief because there's less of a chance to split the vote. But to be honest, I felt kind of a sense of sadness as well. And you hit the nail on the head because think of all the people, whether they were from BC Conservatives or whether they're from BC United, who had their heart set on serving their community as an MLA, who had in many cases probably made some pretty big personal sacrifices, stepping away from businesses. They asked their family and friends to donate to them. They'd been knocking on doors. It's tremendously disruptive. It's disappointing. It's sad for them. Yes. So you know what? I didn't hear this news and dance for joy. That's for sure. I felt a sense of relief, but a lot of compassion for the people that have been asked to step aside. Even from our own party. That's a really difficult thing. And to be honest, watching Kevin Falcon give his remarks, and there's been some hard feelings, I know. I heard some things said in the media and stuff like that. But to be honest, when I saw Kevin's speech to the province about stepping down, I had a lot of admiration there. And I could tell that must have been tremendously difficult. And I felt a lot of compassion for Kevin. And I thought, he will be remembered for doing this, what he believes and what we believe is in the best interest of the province, and that is trying not to split the vote on the right. And I had a lot of, I thought that was a very brave thing to do, and it must have been tremendously difficult.
Oh,
tremendously
it is.
difficult. And so I had an admiration for the way that he was able to be so strong in a moment that must have been really difficult for him.
It is, and just as information, I spoke to him right after the press conference. I go a long ways back with Kevin, and we had a good discussion, and that's exactly what you alluded to. So मैं एलेनोर ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਬਿਹਾਈਂਡ ਦਾ ਸੀਨ ਸੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਨੈਗੋਸ਼ੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਈ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਪਾਰਟ ਆਫ ਦ ਟੀਮ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਨੈਗੋਸ਼ੀਏਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੋ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨੌਲੇਜ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਲੋਟ ਆਫ MLAs ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ they have to set aside and lot of conservative candidates were announced they have to step aside so lot of disruption ਹੋਇਆ ਆ ਤੇ ਬੜੀ when people get into politics and try to serve the community for right reasons it's difficult because making that decision talking to their families and friends and then they throw their name in the towel and then they have to set aside that's it emotional ਵੀ ਹੈ ਔਖਾ ਵੀ ਹੈ our heart goes out to them all the people and I hope they will understand and they will serve the community in one way or the other.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of candidates, regardless of what party they had come from, actually have made significant contributions already in terms of talking about policy, talking about, raising awareness and ideas that actually will be a benefit to all of us during the election, during the writ period. And so it's difficult. I'm so grateful for people who've been working so hard to try to give us the best opportunity to beat the NDP. There's been so many things that I've been very passionate about. Certainly the addictions portfolio, public safety, yes. And just any chance that we can have to make some significant changes here to make our community safer, to help protect people from succumbing to overdoses. This is the reason why, I'm grateful to all these people. We need to put the best team forward, and we need to get David Eby and his radical policies out of government.
So ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਿਸਰਪਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਈਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਟ ਅਸਾਈਡ ਹੋਣਾ ਪਿਆ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮਾਈ ਹਾਰਟ ਗੋਜ਼ ਆਊਟ ਟੂ ਦੋਜ਼ ਪੀਪਲ ਪਰ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਨਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵੋਟ ਸਪਲਿਟ ਹੋ ਕੇ NDP ਨੇ ਬਣ ਜਾਣਾ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਿਸਮੈਨੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ NDP ਦਾ ਐਂਡ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸੀਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਜੇ ਪਾਵਰ 'ਚ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਵਧੀਆ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਹ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛੂੰਗਾ ਸੋ Elenore, I've been to this game for a long time as a journalist as specialized with the politicians so Kevin's the former BC Liberal Party and then BC United is a center to right party. So they have liberals, they have conservatives, even they have some union people and NDP people as well. So Kevin used to call it a big tent. So center to right policies, free enterprise, I understand. Conservative Party, the overtones outside, and it's a good time that I'm talking to you. They think is a far right. Like some policies may be Trump style or federal conservative, Mr. Poliver style policies. How you will tell BC Conservative Party where you guys stack up, listening to my comment?
Yeah, it almost sounds like something that David Eby would say. He calls us an extremist party, but the reality is that we're just everyday British Columbians who've come together with a diverse spectrum of views. There's people in our party who are very socially conservative, but we also have socially liberal people. I myself am fiscally conservative, free enterprise, but I'm more a centrist than on the
far right side.
Well, or even I'm centrist. That's all I'll say. And the thing is that David Eby wants to paint this party as an extremist party. He'll make all kinds of claims about us, but the reality is that there is no more party extreme than the NDP here in this province right now. It's a party that tried to legalize drugs, right? They decriminalized drugs here in British Columbia. They took away your right to have an Airbnb, interfering with private property rights when they failed to build the houses that they promised. They tried to sneak in changes to British Columbia's Land Act that would have affected private property rights and, really given a veto power over use of Crown lands in this province. these are extreme things to do. And, so if they want to talk about extremes, they love to try to scare people and say that we'll take away their reproductive rights and we'll do this and that. These are all falsehoods. This is absolute baloney factory campaign from Mr. Eby. We're just everyday British Columbians. Yes, we come from diverse backgrounds. Yes, we are actually a spectrum of people that have come together. And here's the thing. I received a lot of comments like this when I crossed the floor because people said, how could you, cross to the
totally.
conservative,
That will be my next question.
But let me tell you that, that's the beauty, I think, of our party right now, is that when I was asked to come over, I wasn't asked to change who I was. They wanted my contributions because, look, British Columbians have diverse views. This is a province where people have so many backgrounds, interests, but can we come together on the things that matter most? What your likes and dislikes are and what you want to do in your private time and on your weekends, or what religion or things that you want to celebrate.
Color, race, religion, creed.
We have these rights in British Columbia, and that's not going to change. But what we need to be able to do is to come together as people who are different. And can we agree on, let's fix healthcare. Let's build housing, and arguing about whether or not people like the Pride Parade or not. It doesn't build more houses. But we all have to make sure that we know and understand and respect that there are legally enshrined rights here in Canada and in British Columbia. And the important part is having a respectful discourse and making sure that we remain laser focused on the things like trying to change the situation which we have in BC, where 1 in 3 people are thinking of leaving this province because they can't afford a home here, which is, this is like unconscionable. To be in one of the greatest places on earth, resource-rich province with every opportunity here, and to have 1 in 3 people leaving not only means that we lose those people, but their ideas, their innovations, the potential that every person in British Columbia brings to our province. And that's why I was very happy to get together with this diverse group of people who are the BC Conservatives so that we can put an awesome team forward to beat David Eby.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹੀ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ 'ਚ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕੈਂਪੇਨ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ BC ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਆ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਲੇਬਲ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਲੱਗੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਟਰੰਪ ਟਾਈਪ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਪੀਅਰ ਪੋਲੀਵਰ ਟਾਈਪ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ BC ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਟੂ ਰਾਈਟ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ 'ਚ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਫਰੀ ਐਂਟਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਟਾਈਪ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵੈਰੀ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਸ਼ੀ ਇਜ਼ ਸੈਂਟਰਿਸਟ ਮਤਲਬ ਸ਼ੀ ਇਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਫਾਰ ਲੈਫਟ ਔਰ ਫਾਰ ਰਾਈਟ ਸ਼ੀ ਇਜ਼ ਇਨ ਦ ਮਿਡਲ ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਬਲੀਵ ਇਟ ਮੋਸਟ ਪੀਪਲ ਆਰ in the middle, believe it or not. But ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਤਾਂ ਅਸਲੀ NDP ਵਾਲੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਡਰੱਗ ਨੂੰ ਡੀਕ੍ਰਿਮਨਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਟੈਕਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੈਂਡ ਯੂਜ਼ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ EB is more to extreme than they and they means BC conservatives so ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਹਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ end of the day ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ what is best for British Columbians ਵੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣੀ ਹੈ now going to your comment when people surprise when you jump the ship that's what they call it
jump the ship
cross that
when I crossed over
over
Well, I always like to think of it like, we were always cousins, on the right we were cousins, and now I just went to my cousin's house.
Same family together.
Where the family's getting back together.
Yeah. So you being a part of the LGBTQ community, and we respect that. Everybody should respect that. And and then when you went, you probably had a very good conversation with John Rustad.
Absolutely.
That the policies, the platform, I don't know where you guys stand on that, and a bit touch upon this issue and SOGI.
Yeah, well, I had a very robust conversation with John before I made the decision to join cross to my cousins.
Not jumping.
and the thing is that I have CJ my whole professional career, being a person that advocated to make sure that there was equality in the federal public service, as a RCMP officer before you mentioned. And, I've always championed to make sure that people were, treated well in the workplace. And, I wrote a book with a grant from the LGBT Purge Fund that commemorated my own uncle who was fired from the RCMP for being gay in 1964. And the funding from that book actually went to help kids in Nunavut.
And what is the book called?
It's called Panialuk. It's
how you spell that?
It's oh gosh, spelling test now. Paanialuk. Panialuk, remembering Sergeant David Van Norman, and so
that's a pretty heavy duty word. Where that Panialuk?
Oh, Panialuk means the tall one. And he
Oh,
was very
tall
tall.
one.
It's Inuktitut. Sorry, I should have said that. It's an Inuktitut word.
Which language it came from?
Inuit, like Inuktitut.
Inuit, okay.
It's Inuktitut, which is the Inuit language.
It's good to know because the viewers should understand.
Yeah, and so he had served in the RCMP in the 60s and 50s in the Northwest Territories, now in what's Nunavut. And then they discovered that he himself was a gay man, and he was purged.
Treated badly.
Well, he was purged. He had to quit. And so...
And by the way, it happened
Yeah.
to a few females, and you supported them.
Yeah, and so for
6 of them,
myself, I mean,
think.
the world has changed. Look, we went from a time when someone like my uncle would be fired to a time when not only was I an RCMP officer, but I used to be their spokesperson for the biggest detachment, right?
Yes.
So times have changed. And, I think all of us in Canada know and reflect that our country is very diverse. And, conservatives of British Columbia recognize that. And we also are, very respectful, as all people in Canada should be, that there are legally enshrined rights for all of us: the right to freedom of religion, the right to be free from discrimination based on your sexual orientation, gender. All of these things are protected. And so you mentioned SOGI, and this is often a touch point for people. And so, the conservatives,
Just for our viewers, SOGI, you all know, sexual orientation and gender inequality.
No, identity.
Identity.
Yeah.
So, sexual orientation and gender identity, ਜਿਹਦਾ ਆਪਣੀ community ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਿਆ ਹੈ. So there is a big.
Yeah, and so what SOGI 123 is in British Columbia is it's, a resource that is, I guess, approved by the school district to be used in schools to help with creating an environment that is equal and a framework, really, I guess, for inclusion for all people in schools. We want to replace that. So yes,
Okay, so
we want to replace it.
That's
yeah.
breaking news.
Well, no, we always said that. That's what John said. He's
so you're
get rid
going
of it.
to replace that.
Yes.
So just a pause. So ਮੇਰੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ Elenore is also a part of LGBT community. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਆ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਕਸੁਅਲ ਓਰੀਐਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਜੈਂਡਰ ਆਈਡੈਂਟੀਟੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਸੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ 'ਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੁਜ਼ਾਹਰੇ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵੀ ਹੋਏ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਉਹਦਾ ਇਹ ਕਲੈਰੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਦੇਰ ਪਲੈਨਿੰਗ ਔਨ changing that, or we will find out. But let's go back to what transpired in your meeting with John Rustad when you joined.
Oh yeah, I talked to him about who I am as a person, about some of the allegations, people saying that the party is, and even allegations that I had made before. I'd posted like, oh John, in the past, like, oh, he said something homophobic, and then so we talked about it. And in fact, actually, what he was saying wasn't homophobic. Really, that's my perception at the time. But based on our conversation, I was just like, you know what? He's a great guy. He's not a homophobe. He's
so
not
it was a bit. I had a sorry to interrupt you. I had a good conversation. I had a couple of interviews with Mr. Rustad, comes along very nicely. But the same thing when he went to Alberta to listen to Tucker Carlson, and he's a far right wing guy, and the Fox News guy. He came to Alberta, and the premier of Alberta invited him, and the Alberta government is a pretty right wing party, and he went there. And I asked him, his answer, I can tell you, his answer was that I want to hear the different point of view that what he's, have to offer or say. So that was his answer, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing. We've come to a place in kind of Canada in some ways where it's like we vilify each other for being curious about listening to a speech. It doesn't necessarily mean you espouse the beliefs of the person you're listening to.
So when you said to him that, you have those kind of views, what was John's?
Oh, no, I didn't say to him he had those kind of views. No, I didn't. I asked him about, because, there was some posts before where I'm the one that said like, oh, this is homophobic or whatever. And we actually talked about that. And then I was like,
that was you.
Yeah, and I'm the one. And I was actually wrong. And I, like I said, I've never been asked to change who I am or hide who I am or, in fact, the party is...
Even somebody asks you.
Well, how can I change anyway? But you know what I mean? I'm valued not on my private life. I mean, obviously I'm a good person, but you know what? I'm a professional. I'm an MLA. I've done as hard of work as I can for my community. I've helped come up with ideas to help change our province and done a good job as a critic, and that's what they were judging me on. But I have to say,
no doubt about that.
Well, and
I get to know you really well.
Thank you.
So I definitely you did a great job.
And John Rustad, even at the time, the party already had other people, even candidates that are part of the LGBT community. Maybe they're not as vocal about it as I am, but I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
The party is actually
course.
very inclusive, and the idea that we're not inclusive or that we don't want to support children, for example, is false. I think that what we've seen is a lot of division over things like SOGI, and we need to find a way to get past that and to heal it. We will absolutely foster an inclusive learning environment and a healthy learning environment for all students, and that's not going to change. There's actually legally enshrined rights and obligations that we will live up to. But can we refresh the framework in a way that continues to uphold those rights?
It's not confusing. It's not confusing for people. It's more clear.
Well, what we want to do is, there's been some concerns from parents that some of the materials that were available, for example, in libraries were not age appropriate. And I've actually seen some of those materials. Two of those very graphic sexual books were in my own kids' school, still are. And I can understand why parents are having some concerns. And so, you know what?
And especially in the ethnic communities, they raised and grew up in a totally different environment. And Sikh community, Muslim community, it might be there are other communities and in mainstream community as well. Because
I think regardless of your background, I think, it's not the subject matter. I think most people know this is 2024. In a library at a school, you're going to see different people of different diverse backgrounds as characters or in history books.
And it should be.
And it should be, and it will continue to be. But it's the content. And in some of the materials that have been available in schools in BC, parents have expressed concerns with the content, not the subject, not saying no books about gay people anymore, Elenore, but saying that maybe we shouldn't have graphic depictions of sex. And that's been the case in a couple, and there's been some concern a couple of times over the past few years with third-party presenters coming as well, and the materials that were handed out were not vetted in advance, and they were absolutely not acceptable or age appropriate. And so look, we're just saying we want to refresh it. We're going to, still uphold people's rights to be included and reflected in their school
curriculum. Is it a UN mandate as well, United Nations?
Oh, I'm not sure about that, but you know what? It's the law in Canada. It wouldn't matter if it was the law in the United Nations or not. Look, people have rights here. It's not the subject, it's the content. And that's what I've heard over and over from families, even from different ethnic communities. It's like, look, we understand 2024, different people are going to be featured in the library, but it's the content. And in one case, there's a very graphic depiction of women in a sexual situation, and the book actually was written for adults. And even in the library search tool for SD36, it even says the book is adult interest. And so, we just want to make sure that we're doing
Are
things that
you
are age
changing the
appropriate.
name of SOGI to something else?
I don't know what it'll be.
Okay,
Maybe
but it will be revised way.
Well, you know what? I don't know what John is going to call it. Here's the thing: is that what we want to do? It's not going to be made by the Conservative Party. We're going to, of course, the Minister of Education, whoever that would be, is going to work on that. But this is the kind of work that you have to do with stakeholders, with families,
Educators,
with parents,
families,
yeah, of
parents.
Course. Yeah, and so, I mean, this is the thing, is that David Eby and the NDP want to paint it like we're going to ban books and have book burning parties and, do all this crazy stuff. But the reality is that what we want to do is end this division about SOGI, make sure parents can feel good and trust the materials that are being shown to their kids at school.
So we had a long conversation ਇਸ ਤੇ ਹੋਈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਵਹਿਮ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜੌਨ ਰਾਸਟੈਡ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਊ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਪਰ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸ਼ੀ ਇਜ਼ ਆਲਸੋ ਬਿਲੋਂਗ ਟੂ ਦੈਟ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੋਜੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਓਰੀਐਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਜੈਂਡਰ ਆਈਡੈਂਟਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਬਣੀ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਟੇਕ ਹੋਲਡਰ ਹੈ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਟੀਚਰਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵੋਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਊਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨ ਟਿਊਨ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਦੇਖੀ ਹੋਮ ਬੁੱਕਸ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਟਸ ਗੁੱਡ ਟੂ ਨੋ ਦੈਟ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਅਸਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਰ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਐਂਡ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਕੰਟੀਨਿਊ ਡੂਇੰਗ ਦੈਟ ਲੈਟਸ ਸਵਿਚ ਦ ਗੇਅਰ ਵੀ ਹੈਡ ਅ ਗੁੱਡ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੈਟ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨੀਡਡ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ lot of communities need to know about that. Mental health issues. Okay, now there is another attack happened in Vancouver, one person dead and somebody's hand was cut off with a, and it's happening more too often. And then ended up the person is charged or arrested. We don't know all the facts yet because you were a former RCMP officer. You will appreciate that when things are in front of the courts. But one thing we know, it comes at the front is a mental health issue. And it's just, sometimes because of that reason, people will get away with that murder, just a, slap on the wrist. Wow. So you specialize and you were shadow minister as well. What is your take on this?
Well, what happened yesterday in Vancouver is horrifying, and my heart goes out and is with anyone impacted who witnessed such a horrific scene. Obviously, the victims, the family of the victims. I think that this is a tragedy, but what makes it even worse is to ask that question: could this possibly have been prevented? We know that the person who's been arrested had 60-something contacts with police prior to, and they were had charges already, and they were on probation for another assault. So it's really concerning.
But sorry to interrupt you, Elenore, but 60 one way or other, small or big, doesn't matter.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
It is.
Should be that guy locked up because if he could have been locked up, 60 infringes is a lot.
Well, and here's the thing is that I don't know what the circumstances of those 60 are, but I'll tell you this, is that each one of those 60 interactions was an opportunity to perhaps intervene in a mental health problem, okay?
Yes.
And so we got to look at circumstances in BC. Do we have the right kind of programming? Do we have the capacity that it takes so that when we have this kind of person who's got a mental health disorder, is coming into contact with police multiple times, are the interventions that we're doing sufficient? In this case, it would indicate that no, it wasn't enough because we had this terrible event unfold. Conservatives of BC are committed to building up those capacity, whether it's outpatient programs and community-based programs and interventions, supporting the police to make sure that they have the tools that they need. So here we had 60 interactions with the police. Did they have the right tools? And did they have the right programming available to them?
He could have recommended to mental health specialists or
and we want
facility.
To make sure, so we have to go back and also look at these kinds of things, which we've had terribly and sadly, we've had far too many of these types of things in White Rock. a person with a mental health issue committed a homicide as well as
Yes.
stabbed another person. Tory Dunn in our community murdered by someone who the parole board had said just fell short of being designated a psychopath. I mean, it's horrific. And I think BC, British Columbians have had enough, and they should have enough. But what we have to do, CJ, and what Conservatives of BC are going to do, is we're going to build the capacity of our mental health system, meaning that whether it's involuntary care where people can stay long-term, or whether it's voluntary care, or whether it's therapeutic residences where we can have a therapeutic community, for example, for people not just with mental illness, but maybe brain injury.
Used to have a hospital, Riverview Hospital.
We did, yeah. And actually, I get asked about that all the time, of course. Things have changed a lot. And I think even the best practices in treating mental illnesses have changed. And so we want to build some new stuff, right? We want to make sure that we are purpose building. Things changed from the time that they built Riverview. I had this great tour of Redfish Healing Center, which is BC's only complex care facility. It does mental health and addictions concurrent.
Which one is that?
Redfish. It's actually on the grounds of the former Riverview. I went there. This is a purpose-built facility so that even the building itself is helpful to people who may have mental disorders, right, or mental illness, or are battling an addiction in a complex things, concerned with their mental health. And I think we need to make sure that, we're not just saying like, hey, we're going to open Riverview and lock everybody up. That's not the answer. The answer is that, yes, like Riverview, we need to have the capacity to provide long-term care for people who, in some circumstances, may even need involuntary care. But we need a variety because it's not one size fits all. And I think by looking at ways of building capacity both in involuntary care, in things like therapeutic communities, in things like group homes, or whatever the situation is, we can purpose build it to make sure that we're providing the best care. And you hit the nail on the head earlier because you talked about intervention and looking at those 60 contacts that the person had.
Yes.
And was there something missing from the tools the police had? Was there something missing from what the healthcare professionals had that might have made a difference? And
maybe you can better address that. Let me summarize that what Elenore said. So ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ mental health ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦਿਮਾਗੀ ਖਰਾਬੀ ਕਰਕੇ. So ਆਪਣੇ ਹੁਣੇ recently ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਉਹਨੇ ਮਾਰਤਾ, ਇੱਕ ਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਵੜਤਾ. So that was ਮਤਲਬ horrible thing. ਮਤਲਬ an unprovoked. ਉਹਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਕਨਫਲਿਕਟ ਸੀਗਾ. ਸੇਮ ਥਿੰਗ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ 'ਚ ਹੈਪਨ ਹੋਈ. ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਵਿਚਾਰਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਤਾ, ਇੱਕ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਜਰਡ ਕਰਤਾ. ਉਹ ਐਂਡ ਕਮਸ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼. ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਾਲਾ ਸੀ 60 ਉਹਦੇ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਏ ਹੈ, ਇਨਫ੍ਰਿੰਜਮੈਂਟ ਜਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗਲਤ ਕੰਮ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹਾ ਤੁਰਿਆ ਫਿਰਦਾ ਸੀ. ਸੋ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਰੋਕਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਆ ਪ੍ਰੋਐਕਟਿਵਲੀ. ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਰਿਵਰਵਿਊ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ, ਚਲੋ ਉੱਥੇ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਬੰਦ ਕਰਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ. ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਰੈੱਡ ਫਿਸ਼ ਛੋਟੀ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀ ਆ ਪਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ. ਐਂਡ ਐਲਾਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਰਪਸ ਬਿਲਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਟਸ mental health is not one dimensional. There's
a spectrum of things too, because all of us have to care for our mental health. But the reality is when we see very horrific attacks like yesterday, this is usually untreated or out of control mental illness that hasn't, maybe the medication's not working or the person doesn't have medication, or maybe they're in psychosis because they're using drugs. That takes a very specialized type of care. Mental health, we can all take care of our health by, maybe exercising, sleeping more, controlling our stress, but mental illness. And I think that when it comes to mental illness, there's been quite a lack of attention and focus on illness specifically.
And only we focus when something like this happens.
Well, exactly. And, you'd said something earlier that I just wanted to mention, if a person commits a serious crime like this, if they are found guilty or not guilty by reason of mental disorder, they don't go free. They go to Colony Farm and they can be held there for a long time. And depending on the circumstances, it could be forever if the person is dangerous and not improving their condition.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and it's good to know. But, and this is the thing, but there's a big stretch between not criminally responsible because you have a mental disorder and having a mental illness and hurting somebody else. And, so what happens between someone who has no mental illness and does an assault and someone who's not criminally responsible by having a mental disorder? It's this gap in here between those two scenarios.
That's what happened.
That's where this gap is. So what do we do in here? And the answer really is complex, but we can address it, and conservatives have a plan. And part of it is those things I mentioned, making sure that the police have the tools they need. But it's a capacity issue as well, because we have provisions in the Mental Health Act that allow us, for example, to apprehend people who are a risk to themselves or others. But where can we give those people the treatment they need? Where can they live? And another example here is that sometimes people, I'll just use this as an example, if you had schizophrenia, maybe you were in psychosis because maybe the medication wasn't working anymore, or maybe something happened that created a situation where the person became unwell. That person can be apprehended under the Mental Health Act, and they can be taken in and have involuntary care. But when that person is back to being stable and feel healthier again, they can't be held anymore because they're no longer a threat to themselves. But it doesn't mean that they don't need care, because the schizophrenia isn't cured, it's just managed. And we need to make sure that after a person is stable, that we're providing the correct kind of housing and supports so that they don't go back, or so that they're in a safe situation, and that if there are signs that a person is not coping well or not managing, or their illness is, changing, then that the supports that the families and that the people with managing their illness in the community, that they have them. And right now, they don't. There's not enough. And so there's some great programs in the community, including pilots for community teams that go into people's homes to help.
Yes. There is a lot of volunteer organization. So ਸਾਡੀ ਲੰਮੀ ਚੌੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਬਾਰੇ, ਐਂਡ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਹਣੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਪੈਸਿਟੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ। ਪੁਲਿਸ ਡਿਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਇਨਫ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਔਰ ਐਕਸਪਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਲਟੀਪਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਆ ਤੇ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਪੈਣੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਬੰਦਾ ਨਾ ਮਰ ਜੇ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ 'ਚ ਹੋਇਆ, ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ 'ਚ ਹੋਇਆ ਆ। ਦੈਨ she mentioned about the Tory and those kind of things. Mental health ਜਿਹੜੇ issue ਹੈ ਕਾਫੀ ਸੀਰੀਅਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਪਰਪਸ ਬਿਲਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਹੈਲਪ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਦੇ ਹੈਵ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਮੈਡੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ, proactively manage them, ताकि ये community ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਨਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ। So Elenore, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. You were saying,
it goes
CJ,
fast.
You said 45 minutes. We didn't even touch the surface of the issues that we have in the community. But anyways, I will invite you again. But so these are the issues, and there are multiple issues. I will quick comment on those vending machines.
Oh, yeah.
That put like in hospitals.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Look, there'll always be a role for services to reduce harm. But in our province for too long, David Eby and the NDP have built up a one-legged stool, right? We're trying to sit on the stool with one leg, and that leg and the pillar has been focused on harm reduction instead of a balance where we need to have prevention, intervention, treatment, and then recovery is something that is for the rest of a person's life. What services, what kind of housing, what kind of jobs, training. All these things go together to help a person recover for their whole life. But the focus for the last 7 years, until David Eby got embarrassed, frankly, has been solely on harm reduction. And now, 40-something days before the election, here we have a premier that's trying to pretend that he's always focused on prevention and treatment. It's just not the case. I think that, I've been hearing from the healthcare workers in Nanaimo had said that, the vending machine, people are using the pipes and the straws and everything like it's a commodity for them.
And it's close to school.
Yeah, and they're using it to they'll empty the machine. They'll take all of the pipes out of it, all the crack pipes, and they'll sell them. And then when the machine is empty, then we have people going in and harassing the workers inside the ER trying to get more pipes. And, you know, none of this is really guiding people towards any kind of recovery. And I get it, you know, we definitely want to create a situation where we can help keep people alive. But what's the next step? And I think where David Eby and his radical NDP government have truly fallen off the cliff is that they've so focused on the here and now with this harm reduction, they forgot the what's next.
So ਆਪਣੇ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ 4-5 ਮਿੰਟ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆ ਤੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵੈਂਡਿੰਗ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਸ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਲਾਈਆਂ ਆ, ਐਲਨੋਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਹਾਰਮ ਰਿਡਕਸ਼ਨ ਯੈਸ ਉਹਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਪਰ ਜਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਾਂ ਲਾਈਆਂ, ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਨਾਇਮੋ ਹੈਗਾ, ਫਿਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਖਾਲੀ ਕਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ER ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਡਿਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਖਾਲੀ ਪਿਆ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਰੀਫਿਲ ਕਰੋ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਦਿਓ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮਲਟੀਪਲ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ EB ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਏਜੰਡਾ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਜਸਟ ਟੂ ਕਲੈਰੀਫਾਈ, I don't translate word to word what Elenore is saying. I just summarize. मैं summary ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਣਾ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। So just as a disclosure, I just summarize what she is saying. ਇੰਨੀ ਲੰਮੇ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬਰੀਫ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕੀ ਸੀ। So for last couple of minutes, Elenore, so there is multiple issues. You know, there are affordability issue, there is a housing issue, transportation issue, healthcare issue, big lineup in the hospitals, like a multiple. How you briefly, in a summary, as a conservative party, and so that's number one. And when you're like a proper platform coming out.
Yeah, a proper platform ASAP. I know that people want to see, and believe me, we've been working really hard. A lot of great ideas, and I'm very proud of what the team has come up with, what John is you know, going to be putting forward. I'm really proud of it. Yeah, there's a lot of problems in BC right now. I think for me as a parent, as you know, a resident of British Columbia and Surrey especially, healthcare, you know, is something, without your health, what do you have? You know, we have to really make sure that British Columbians get the healthcare that they deserve, and make sure that it continues to be the universal health care that Canadians and British Columbians value. And so John Rustad has put forward a plan that I think is going to be great, and it's going to be able to increase services for people, get rid of waiting lists, having a patient guarantee, that people can get the health care that they need when they need it. And you know what? We value having that universal single payer health care. That's not going to change. But what we do want to change is that we make sure that people can actually get help. We shouldn't be closing down emergency rooms. We shouldn't have people, you know, in a couple of years ago, in fact, there was a woman that waited 14 hours and died in the waiting room in Kamloops. I just reread that story the other day. You know, this isn't the kind of health care British Columbians deserve. And so that's going to be a priority, you know, day one, hit the ground running. Let's get our healthcare system functioning again. And, you know, the people that work in our healthcare system, you know, these are heroes, okay?
They are heroes, and they're stressed out.
They're stressed out, and day in, day out, there are people working beyond their capacity. And that's not fair. And I think that they also deserve a government that will take a leadership role to fix the mess that we're in right now. And that's going to take bold action. Our plan is bold. But you know what? I believe in this plan, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. Hopefully voters will give us that chance to make things happen here and change directions in our province.
Thank you very much, Elenore. Appreciate your time. You're a busy person. All the outlets, media want you.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad, and it's very nice. It's a very open discussion. So ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ Elenore Sturko, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਸਰੀ ਸਾਊਥ ਤੋਂ MLA ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, BC United ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਰਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, so BC Conservative candidate, and now she is running from Surrey Cloverdale, very capable person, and she had a good hold on the issues. Mental health ਬਾਰੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸੀ। ਪਰ ਐਂਡ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪਲੇਟਫਾਰਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਪਲੇਟਫਾਰਮ ਕਦੋਂ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ। So Elenore said shortly they will have that platform, ਐਂਡ ਦੇ ਵਿਲ ਫਿਕਸ ਦ ਥਿੰਗਸ ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕੈਮਲੂਪਸ 'ਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ 14 ਘੰਟੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਟਾਊਨਾਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਬੰਦ ਹੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਦੇਰ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਮਲਟੀਪਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਐਂਡ ਦੇਖੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪਲੈਟਫਾਰਮ ਆਊਗਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਇਨਫੋਰਮਡ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਬਣਾਉਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਆ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਏਰੀਆ 'ਚ MLA ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਕਟਿਵ ਪੀਪਲ ਆ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਆਸਕ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਮੇਕ ਅ ਇਨਫੋਰਮਡ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ NDP ਬਾਰੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਵੀ ਸਟੇ ਵੈਰੀ ਨਿਊਟਰਲ ਔਨ ਦਿਸ ਪਲੈਟਫਾਰਮ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਵੱਧ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਈ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਹੈਗੇ MS ਮੋਟਰਸ ਐਂਡ ਕਾਰ ਡੀਲਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੈ MS ਮੋਟਰਸ ਐਂਡ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਲੋਕੇਟਡ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿੰਗ ਜੋਰਜ ਬੁਲਾਵਰਡ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਲੋਕੇਟਡ ਹੈ MS Motors. So if you need a car, go see them. Thank you for sponsoring my program. So ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਐਲਨੋਰ ਸਟਰਕੋ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਇਸੇ ਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੁਲਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਅਕਤੂਬਰ 19 ਐਂਡ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆਪਣੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਬੈਸਟ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਹੈ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ CJ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ ਐਵਰੀ ਥਰਸਡੇ 7 to 8 o'clock ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ ਐਂਡ ਹੈਵ ਅ ਵੰਡਰਫੁਲ ਹੈਪੀ ਹੈਲਥੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ